Bangalore University, Government First Aid College and PG Center Shankaranayana Kundapura Udupi. I am Mohini here with the negligence and defense of negligences. Let us discuss today. Now let us know what is negligence. Much of our civil law focuses on negligence torts. These torts are civil causes of action based on someone's negligence. Negligence is the failure to exercise a reasonable standard of care toward another person. In other words, courts examine how a reasonable person would have acted in the same or similar situation. Would a reasonable person juggle fire near a known gas leak? Or would a reasonable person drive while working on a laptop and also eating a steak dinner? These are the examples of negligent behavior. If someone is hurt by this behavior, that person can sue for money damages. Some parties are held to an even higher standard than that of a reasonable person. Because of their positions, certain parties are held to a heightened standard of care to others. Let us see what is negligence in detail. Negligence is an action taken by a defendant that causes foreseeable danger or injury to another, like intentionally throwing a banana peel on the floor of the office cafeteria. Someone is bound to slip and fall. The elements are pretty simple. The defendant had a duty to the injured party. The defendant failed to act on his duty. The negligent act caused direct injury. The injury should have been reasonably foreseeable. Once the elements have been satisfied, a defendant can be held liable for injuries sustained by the plaintiff. But is every injury sustained at the hands of another party a cause for a negligence lawsuit? Maybe the banana peel tossing plus doesn't have very good aim. Should be should he be held fully liable if a co-worker slips? Well, maybe, but not every action is cause for litigation. There are several defenses that can be used to reduce a defendant's liability or shift a portion of the liability onto the plaintiff. Let's take a look at negligence and possible defenses for landowners, common carriers, innkeepers. Landowners. Let us see about the landowners. Owners. Let us start with landowners. A landowner is simply the party who owns the land on which the tort occurred. Let us say I am at Ned's house. I am in the backyard and I accidentally fall into the large hole. I am injured and like to be sued Ned. What standard of care did Ned owe me? And did he fail to fulfill that duty? This answer depends on my legal status or why I was in Ned's ad. Let's say I'm a trespasser. I was in Ned's ad without Ned's permission. Generally speaking, this means that Ned doesn't owe me a duty of care. If I sue Ned, he can use this defense. Now, let's say I'm a licensee. This means I was in Ned's ad with Ned's permission. Let's say Ned invited me to a backyard barbecue at his house. In this case, Ned has a duty to warn me about the hole or fix the hole, but only if he knows about the hole. If Ned didn't know about it, then he can use that lack of knowledge as a defense. Lastly, let us say I'm an invitee. This means I was in Ned's ad with Ned's permission and for a business purpose connected to the land. Let's say Ned hired me to fix the fence in his backyard. This time Ned has a duty to warn me about the hole or to fix the hole. Ned has a duty to inspect the ad for any dangerous conditions. His lack of knowledge won't be a defense to negligence. Then, common carriers. Now let us take a look at common carriers. A common carrier is a business available to the public for the transportation of goods or passengers. This includes transportation services like airlines and taxi companies. Common carriers owe their passengers the highest duty of care to provide safe transportation. This means that they must act with as much care as is reasonably possible considering the type of vehicle used and other practical aspects of the business operation. A failure to meet this duty is considered to be negligence. For example, let's say Ned is a bus driver. I am a passenger on Ned's bus. While I am riding to work one day, Ned suddenly slams on the brakes and I fall into the aisle. I am injured and want to sue a Ned and the bus company. I'll have to prove that Ned was negligent. If Ned was trying to find a song on the radio and almost near ended another vehicle, then Ned likely acted negligently. This is true even though a normal driver in his or her own car playing with the radio probably wouldn't be found negligent due to the short stop. However, if a bicyclist suddenly turned in front of Ned, then Ned likely didn't act negligently. He can use the reasonableness of his actions. Considering the circumstances as a defense, for instance, Ned might offer evidence showing that buses typically take a longer amount of time to come to stop, thus making it necessary for him to slam on the brakes to avoid hitting the bicyclist. Innkeepers. Let's turn to innkeepers. An innkeeper is a person who provides accommodations to guests as a business. Innkeepers, like common carriers, owe guests a high duty of care. An innkeeper acts negligently if he or she fails to reasonably protect a guest from possible harm. This means the innkeeper either knew or should have known of the danger. Let's say that Ned owns a bed and breakfast, and I'm his guest. I trip on a broken stair and I'm injured. I want to show Ned. Ned used that staircase and saw the broken stair earliest that morning. As an innkeeper, he had a duty to immediately fix the stair or to warn me. However, if Ned just used that staircase and the stair was fine, then he likely didn't act negligently. He can use his reasonable lack of knowledge as defense. Now let us see what is negligence defenses. To successfully defend against a negligence suit, the defendant will try to negate one of the elements of the plaintiff's cause of action. In other words, the defendant introduces evidence that he or she did not owe a duty to the plaintiff, exercise reasonable care, did not cause the plaintiff's damages, and so forth. In addition, a defendant may rely on one of a few doctrines that may eliminate or limit liability based on alleged negligence. Contributory negligence. When an injury occurs, both the defendant and the plaintiff can be at fault. For example, in a car accident between car A and car B, car A's driver was speeding and car B's driver was driving drunk. Both drivers are engaged in negligent risk creating behavior. The negligence on the part of the injured plaintiff is called contributory negligence. A plaintiff contributes to his own injury when his behavior falls below what is required by the reasonable person standard, which gauges what the reasonable person would have done to protect himself from injury. In other words, contributory negligence requires everyone to take reasonable steps to avoid danger. Traditionally, contributory negligence was a harsh rule. It completely barred a negligent plaintiff from recovering, no matter how minor the plaintiff's fault. If a plaintiff had any part to play in his on injury, no matter how minimal, the plaintiff could not recover from the defendant. For example, Timmy leaves the bar from a heavy night of drinking and slams his car into Ronald's car, which is parked illegally on the side of the road. Ronald is injured and files a lawsuit against Timmy. Under contributory negligence, Ronald would not recover from Timmy for Ronald's injuries despite Timmy's drunk driving. Ronald contributed to his own injuries by parking his car illegally and is therefore barred from recovery. Comparative negligence. Today, only a few states still use the traditional harsh form of contributory negligence. Most states have abandoned it and adopted a fairer approach known as comparative negligence. Under comparative negligence, recovery is apportioned based on both the parties' degree of fault. Comparative negligence allows a negligent plaintiff to recover some damages for their injuries. Comparative negligence prevents the defendant from being completely relieved of responsibility simply because the plaintiff also failed to exercise due care. There are two often used forms of comparative negligence throughout the United States. Some states use pure comparative negligence. Other states use what is known as partial comparative negligence, also known as modified comparative fault. Pure comparative negligence allows the plaintiff to recover damages based on the percentage of fault. The judge or jury reviews all the evidence and assigns a percentage of responsibility to each party. For example, if a plaintiff is 40% at fault for the accident and the defendant is 60% at fault, the plaintiff can still recover 60% from the defendant. Under contributory negligence, this plaintiff would have been barred from recovery. Pure comparative negligence applies even if the plaintiff is the primary cause of her own injuries. For example, if a plaintiff is 95% at fault and the defendant is only 5% at fault, the plaintiff can still recover 5% from the defendant. The second type of comparative negligence is partial comparative negligence. Under partial comparative negligence, a plaintiff recovery is reduced by the percentage of fault only if that percentage is below 50%. If the plaintiff's fault is 50% or above, then he will be completely barred from recovery. Thus, an injured party can only recover if she was not equally responsible or greater. For example, if a plaintiff is 60% at fault for the accident and the defendant is 40% at fault, the plaintiff would recover nothing under partial comparative negligence. However, if the court found the plaintiff only 40% responsible, then that plaintiff could recover 60% of his damages from the defendant. Assumptions of risk. Assumption of risk is the third primary negligence defense. A plaintiff is said to assume the risk of injury if he voluntarily enters a dangerous situation fully aware of the risk involved. The principle behind this defense is that a plaintiff who voluntarily consents to an activity cannot later sue if injured. Voluntary means the person assuming the risk had a choice to avoid it. If the person had no choice to avoid the dangerous activity, then he cannot have assumed the risk. For example, in 2007, personal injury lawsuit brought by a student against a community college. A 40-year-old student successfully sued the school for injuries she suffered in a backpacking classes. The class was mandatory as a part of the college's physical education requirement. The court held that because she was new to backpacking, she was in the position of following the directions of the gym instructor, her superior, and thus didn't assume the risk voluntarily. Voluntarily assuming the risk can be either expressed or implied. Expressed consent may be written, verbal, or through any other expressed manifestation. Consent can be implied by the plaintiff's knowledge of the risk and a subsequent conduct. To prove the plaintiff's impliedly assumed the risk, the defendant must show point number one, the plaintiff had actual knowledge of the danger involved. Second point, the plaintiff understood and appreciated the risk associated with the danger. And third one is the plaintiff voluntarily participated in the activity with full knowledge of the danger. Then, implied consent is most commonly associated with sports. If a person participates in a sporting activity, there is implied consent that the person is subjecting himself to injury foreseeably associated with that sport. For example, a race car driver impliedly assumes the risk of serious injury or death from a crash each time he. We have come to an end of the this video and even this chapter also. We'll see you in the next chapter in the next video. Thank you. Until then, take care. Bye bye.